Thing that's being named. So we have three primary units of consciousness and units of energy, called partikai, partike, and particum. There's a whole bunch of teachings that go with this that gets into something called partikai phasing. Partikai phasing, in simple terms, is how these three units interact with each other, and it starts out as one unit. Let me use my thing here. Okay, you have the partikai, the partike, and the particum. Basically, they become antimatter, which is actually gaseous light. If you want to look at it that way, it would be considered density 5 gaseous light. You have antimatter, which is the opposite of matter. All right, these are the base units of conscious energy that group together in many different ways to form particles, antiparticles. Particles live in our particle universe, which is called the particum universe. This is where you'll get these words. You'll see these words all over the place. You'll see the abbreviation PCM or PKA. It means particum universe or partike universe. Partike universe is our parallel universe that's built upon a primary base of partike antimatter units, where our system is the particum universe. You could look at particum as the female and partike as the male, and partikai, the original spirit or androgynous being out of which they both came. Now partikai, partike, and particum are standing waves, little tiny standing waves that cycle. They go back and forth from being an antimatter state of unification, then coming flashing on into manifestation of particle and antiparticle. This would be their oscillation stage when they're on here, and you would be able to see them if you were looking at them with your etheric microscope vision. When they go into vibration, they would flash off and become antimatter particles. That's a simple way to understand it. Now what these do, these units of consciousness do, they always come in the three, in a group of three, or one that becomes two and then goes back to one again. So they cycle. That's called partikai phasing. They flash on and off, but they're not just individual. They group together, and they form first strings of these units, and those strings then form grids, like crosshatched grids of these units, like a fabric being woven, a fabric of light and sound, a vibration and oscillation of energy units, and those grids end up with three different rhythms of flashing off and on that form a three-dimensional base structure that creates chelons. Chelons are basically three-dimensional forms of light and sound waves. They're three-dimensional because you have three different lines of partikai, partike, and particum flashing on and off at three different rhythms. So it creates a three-dimensional format. This is the basis. We call this the crystal body, the chelon crystal body. Everything in manifestation, including the entire universal framework itself, has a crystal body structure. Later, we come to call these the shields. So when we talk about the standing scalar wave shields, we are talking about a part of the crystal body structure. Jesus didn't get crucified. That was one of the things that all sorts of people, they love the teachings, but they couldn't deal with that. Why? You should be glad. You think you'd be happy that the person that, what he stood for and whether he ascended. He said, well, can't do anything more here, but we did what we could and we left the books behind. It's time to go. He went out through the Ark of the Covenant, which is one of the gates. What we teach is not deny Christ at all. What the Cloister Duratura plates teach does not deny Christ at all. What it denies is the fact that it was one person that ended up crucified, so everybody else should be miserable and crucify themselves from there on after. The crucifixion story was not true. It was created right a bit before the time of the Council of Nicaea by certain sects that wanted to get control of the mass belief systems. They consolidated the two persons who represent one. They were both named Jeshua, but it was spelled differently, and they're from different family lines. One was from what's called the House of David. One was from what's called the House of Solomon. From the House of Solomon came Jeshua 12, Jeshua Melchizedek, after his baptism. And he was the 12-strand avatar that the whole Christ drama was built on. And within a few years of his birth, there was another one born that was part Anunnaki and part angelic human. He was born in cooperation with the higher angelic legions that assisted the man named Jeshua Melchizedek to come in. It was a co-evolution agreement. They tried to restate the Emerald Covenant in that period of time. They were supposed to assist the two primary race strains on the planet to get their DNA back to where it was supposed to be so they could do ascension. Jeshua 12 worked with the people who had the original angelic human imprint. Jeshua, they call him 9 because he was a 9-strand avatar rather than a 12-strand activated avatar. Jeshua 9 was here to assist human beings who had got entangled in their genetic families with Anunnaki hybridization from ancient times because they carried certain distortions in the DNA template that would block their ability to ascend or to pass through stargates. So the two Jeshuas were sent in as part of an attempted restatement of the Emerald Covenant 2,000 years ago to bring these teachings back to us. There were books. They're always looking for the lost books of Jesus. They know he must have wrote something. Everybody else was writing things out there. In 2003-40 BC. Our good buddy Thoth, who the universe was very proud of and the founders loved dearly because of all he had done to try to help rehabilitate the Anunnaki races, he caved into pressure and he orchestrated something we call the Great Deception. Because he was so trusted, he was allowed into the colonies of the deane, the Ascended Masters groups that had come here. They had come here to use Stargate 6 to open it. It's something called the Halls of Amareya Passage. It's in Stargate 6. It runs from Sirius B down into Earth. There's like a passage connected to the main passages. They were going to use it to run enough frequency to override the Nibiru and Diodic crystal grid where it was coming out in what is now the area of Stonehenge. Thoth was supposed to assist in that process. He was also given Cloister Duratura Plate 11. Now these plates are discs. They're small discs that store all of the information that has to do with the race history here, the planetary history, but also the race history that went up further into the higher harmonics. He was supposed to translate verbally, not auditory, not in written form, because there was too much.
Shame. 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 Shame.
All the time. Was it just a game to you? But I mean so deep. You know I'm such a fool for you. You got me wrapped around your finger. Do you have to let it linger? Do you have to? Do you have to? Do you have
Still talking about
Atlantis?
this guy's been talked about for years.
There's a lot of people saying, oh, Nibiru's coming in. No, it's not. Nibiru's in Phantom right now. And, it's still passing through there. What's coming in is Wormwood, which is that piece of Malvac that they turned into a battle star. Normally, it would pass into our system and come up down here through the lock that's on the end of, like outside of Universal Gate 1, which is an Orion sword. It would pass up and then finally into our solar system by coming up in the asteroid belt, through the lock that's in the asteroid belt, up into our galactic plane. And it would circle behind the sun, where the sun is 4 here, but it wouldn't, like Earth is over here. It would go up behind the sun, then it would pass back out of our system again and disappear once it went back up into the Gate 8 region. I believe it started to disappear right here, which would be when it hit Orion's belt.
In the ancient Hindu texts, were these wars waged between opposing factions of extraterrestrial beings? There's a consistent pattern in the layout of the planets of our solar system, except for one highly unusual anomaly.
The distribution of the planets in the solar system has always been a puzzle. They seem to be spaced out according to some sort of mathematical arrangement, but there's a big gap between Mars and Jupiter. And when you look there today, what we see is the asteroids, lots and lots of rocky fragments.
The discovery led astronomers to conclude that there had to at one time have been a planet between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter. And what lies within this gap now is an asteroid belt. Many scientists speculate that these asteroids are the remnants of a world that was destroyed thousands of years ago by some cosmic collision.
The gods fought amongst themselves across the cosmos, one planet fighting another planet. And that in fact, one planet was completely destroyed during this cosmic battle. And as a result of that, they destroyed their homeworld and had to reestablish civilization on a new planet.
Might its destruction have come as the result of an alien war?
So the word Adashi, for instance, is something that is special to us because we are following the path of Adashi, the path of Christ our return. When I use the word Christ our, by the way, or any of the words like Christ, or anything like that. We spell it with a K. It's either K-R-I-S-T, sometimes we use shorthand, or K-R-Y-S-T. There's a reason for that. It's not because we're basing everything on the Bible or anything like that, nothing against the Bible, but it's spelled with a K because that's how it originally was, and what it refers to there's 7 syllables to it. We often will just shorten it to 5. It's the first 7 audible sound tones of creation, and they are ka, ra, ya, sa, ta, ha, la. And we also often just shorten it to ka, ya, ra, sa, ta, Christ, right? So that's where we use the word Christ. It has to do with the sound tones, the vibrations, the first audible sound tones when we get into first Partikai creation. Before all these structures occur in the cosmos, there are certain things that happen on a very, very, very nano-micro level that the first, what would be audible sounds or audible vibrations, and that is why we use that word Christ. So that's where it's coming from. It's not saying, we're Christian, which means we're not this and we're not that and we're not the other thing. It's something that belongs to everyone. The distortion in their Stargate structure, where the natural flows are not occurring, which creates distortions in the biological forms on that planet. So we have been locked into this planet. This has been a prison planet for at least 13,000 years. And actually, we went further back than that, but there were little bits of times where the gates were working properly. This is the first time. Why everything's coming to a head right now is because it was known in 22,326 BC, which was the last Stargate opening cycle, and that one failed, that this would be the next one. They knew this time period would be the next one because there's a specific time frame in which the gates open, and they stay open for a period of time and then they close again. That's why it's all coming to a head again.
Okay, but when you're saying the gates are going to open, you're talking about the 12 that have been taken over, so to speak. Those, I'm assuming, are not going to open.
Oh yeah, they're open and they meet publicly about this information in interviews, is because in I think it was March 25th of 2007, something occurred in the solar system that just shut the program down. We are on the 200-year evac program, period. And that's it. The gates are closing permanently. The gates are closing in this galaxy permanently in 200 years.
When you say something happened in the galaxy, can you explain a little more?
I'll get to that.
Okay.
Yeah, some other diagrams for the planet. And these core gates are opening on the planet because this is an evacuation. We have a 200-year warning because something happened with the sun that it's not going to be, one is not going to be able to live on this planet by about 2976. And it's going to be before that, actually, but that's when it explodes, from what they said. We're in a timeline, and we're stuck in a timeline. Voyager's mentioned it, that if we didn't make certain changes with the stellar activation cycle and reach a certain level, we were going to get dragged into a probability alignment in which the planet literally exploded because of the mechanics that were occurring with the Zetas and different intruder races, and that is a probability line we got stuck in, and that's why we are on an evac order, and that's why we're speaking about it publicly. There are things we can do. It's not like the world is ending. No, in fact, this is really good because what could have happened in 2012 isn't going to. But there's certain ones that really want the light body and the spirit body structure, etc. in your anatomy. You would be able to see it. Mm-hmm. And you would know where to stand in it, and you would know what to do and how to breathe, and you could use it and go in ascension.
Okay, so the 12 stargates that we're talking about, which have been interfered with, let's say, they're located at certain places on the planet, physical places.
Yeah. The outer ones are the ones that fell. The core ones
won't fall. Okay, so and those are the ones that are, you say, ancient, that are being reactivated, as you call it. Okay, and those are also located at certain places,
and in different places.
Different places.
Yeah, the outer ones surface at in one set of 12 places.
So there will be a lot of misdirects. I'm thinking, and there are a lot of misdirects going on the planet right now, to where certain people are directing people to focus on certain areas of the planet which contain these stargates, thinking that they are, ascension stargates, when in fact they are taking them to another place.
Yes.
It's not so good.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, what they are being guided to fall stargates. So they're not called stargates, they're called wormholes. And wormholes lead to black hole systems that are finite life systems. We are being taught Masters Templar mechanics to be able to assist them, or the ground crew, just like on the other side you have what we call the Metatronic crew that are working the Atlantean Death Star Merkaba stuff that is what runs the wormholes. There's a whole bunch of people running around thinking they're doing ascension.
Yes.
That aren't. This diagram was is a close-up of a certain section of the maps that I showed you before that plug into the pictures that science draws of the galaxy and that kind of thing. It's showing our Milky Way system and the M31 that we're a part of in our probability set in our Vecca. And over here is the parallel Vecca. And over in this parallel Vecca, there is a cluster of fall systems. That is the black hole system called the alpha black hole system. They've created, as you can see, these probability fields, these balls within balls, overlap each other, right? And in part of their natural configuration, that there is an overlap between them. Well, what the alpha system is doing in the parallel universe is using the Metatronic Atlantean Death Star Merkaba technology to reverse. If you reverse certain currents using that technology, you can harness a certain part of the field next to you and drag it into your system, and that is what they're trying to do. This place in between here, normally they would just be normal pass-throughs, but this one is all convoluted with all sorts of implant structures that are wormhole structures. They refer to this as the dragon's eye. The word dragon comes in, actually not because of big winged creatures, but there was a race that got involved with all of this very, very far back in time called the Dragoon. And the Dragoon races took sides over which sides of the fallen ones they were going to side with, and the Dragoon races ended up with some of theirs fallen, trying to help the others, and then you ended up with ones that wanted them all exterminated, ones that wanted just the one side exterminated, ones that just wanted the other. So the dragon races are actually the Dragoon race line. It is a reptilian-based race line, reptilian crossed with what are called equerry. And equerry are a group of the ones that originally were called aquery before they fell. The aquery are from the Aquarian matrix that are the hosters, the ones that are helping here. Some of them incarnated into the falling matrices to try to assist, and a group of them had, this is ancient, this is what we have right now. And like, the science tells us this is normal and this is natural. Wow, our planet's tilted about 23.5 degrees and it does this cycle called the precession of the equinoxes. And we've got the ecliptic shield, that cuts through. The sun's shield is here and ours, comes here. This is totally twisted. Our planet is tilted. This messes up its entire system. It's not just tilted. This one here shows at least a relatively normal-looking cathara grid inside. There's a whole set of unsacred, not sacred geometries that go with the Death Star Merkaba stuff. It has to do with the shapes of the flows, where before we had I talked about those, the arms the petals that stood out like this, and they're 45-degree angles, and they phase and spark and generate quantum, right? There's another one that has them pulled down like this, where they look much more like a flower. We call it the daisy of death, or the bloom of doom, but they're phase locked, where they can't phase, and that means it can't generate quantum. It means it's a planet that is dying because it can't breathe. And that's one of the things, and it constricts the cathara grid at the center. And so something, I think we have one that shows that. What that also does is create a bulge at the equator where it squashes the natural spherical shape down. Hello,
Is there also
they're the structures in which and through which matter materializes and forms and identities individuate. They consider that part of the manifest body of God's source, and they're talking about the cosmos as being the manifest body. And there is a field of just pure cognition that is beyond that. It is eternal, it is always aware. Time as we know it in linear form is just not a reality there, but it's understood as an experiential quality within the framework of materialization. So in that context of understanding a little bit about how we look at God and the concept of God, yes, there is one. It's not some big father dude on with a big white beard that's going to send you to hell if you're bad, right? There is structure involved in this. Now we went through what is called particle creation, which takes it from the first unit of consciousness in the consciousness field of God that did something, went under certain changes. From those changes, that shape grew and literally created the spherical wheels within wheels, or spheres within spheres, that is the hidden structure behind all cosmic order, and even galactic order, planetary order, and your own body's order, and atoms' order. So this, if you think of it as just an example of a cosmos, all right, you have a center point, right? and you have a sphere. Where you see circles are actually spheres of energy. All right, you have one sphere, two sphere, and a third one in the center, smaller ones, and then lots of these little ones in the center. What this is showing us is consciousness comes out from the center point into this domain, or this sphere. It's called the Hara body. And first it individuates into the two larger spheres, and they individuate into sets, and this all happens at the same time, right? It expands outward. These are called, when it expands outward, it's called Ikashi expansion cycles, where consciousness is coming out from the God Source consciousness field into the smaller form or structure of materialization, and expands out through these cycles simultaneously, one on each side. This particular line is referred to as a vector. Time vector, time-space vector. One end of it is referred to as an event horizon. So one time vector has two event horizons, right? Now, here you have a core, here you have an inner, here you have a middle, and here you have an outer domain on each side. Reality fields take place within all of those. So it's not just that there are numerous reality fields. You have ones in the outer bands, you have ones in the middle, inner, and core bands. The process of coming into existence is expanding out through experiential cycles within the Akashic expansion cycle till you get to this point. So we are in the middle of a drama now that this universal Veka is going, the Eka-Veka system as it's called, is going into a starfire cycle. It's going to finish its starburst cycle, and concurrently the starfire cycle is going to begin running with it. That means we need to, anybody who's not going to participate in either the cow fall or the Shona fall needs to get their light bodies ready for what it means to get inhaled. To the 5 hours. Only a little bit. Only go to the garden, to the deane. The deane is the name of a cell, one of the cells, one of the many cells of the light body structure. It is a middle region cell in what are called the middle domains. And there are individuals and groups who will be able to, when the time comes of the big contraction, be able to move through. Some people will be able to take their bodies with them. Other people, particularly if they have metatronic damage to their shields, will, when it's time for them to naturally pass, when their natural life expectancy is done, they would find their transition through into the garden gates if they built in their light body now what is needed, because they would ride their light body through. Now, if it gets really strange here, stranger than it already is, there is always, when the planetary Templar is being tampered with to the degree that it is right now by the Illuminati forces,
Lyra.
I have come with news, Regent. He is harnessing technology to challenge you.
Go on.
They are able to manipulate dust. And Ezreal spoke of a new knife bearer.
Then, perhaps it's time to send these mortals a warning. You are a cesspit of moral filth. Do not lie to me. A man, ruthless, but fallible, not unlike yourself.
Okay.
Our shadow's the same as Lyra's dust.
Yes.
And is dust dark matter?
Yes. Smaller and smaller, the more the tampering gets bigger and bigger. They're tampering big time, and they are moving forward toward an agenda of intending a world war situation, which would give a perfect excuse for ETs to come in, pretend they're our brothers, and say, you can't be doing that to your planet anymore. We created you. You know, you're our children, so they can get on the planet to finish what they wanted to do with their beast black hole machine that's anchored here. All right, now, if we don't want to be part of this, we need to get the light body structure ready. And to get the light body structure ready means being able to do something we've not been able to do here in ages and ages. In fact, we haven't been able to do it in Density 1 since the fall of Terra, which was 550 million years ago.
The Lyran-Draconian Wars were ancient cosmic conflicts that shaped our known universe, and it all began in Lyra. The Lyra constellation was home to the Lyrans and Vegans. Their civilizations flourished for millions of years, and were known for advanced societies and peace. But right next to Lyra lay the Draco constellation, home of the Draconians, a race of dark, service-to-self beings originating from another universe. The original Draconian lineage is a race known as the Chiakar, aggressive and violent beings. They have a caste system based on genetics. The upper echelon are the dragons that we recognize from stories and mythology here on Earth. These beings of immense power are neutral and can swing between light and dark depending on their whims. These mysterious reclusive dragons are not inherently evil and prefer to stay out of conflict. The middle echelon are the reptilians, known as the warrior caste. Standing 8 feet tall with alligator-like jaws, long tails, and thick green scales, these reptilians were master geneticists and ruthless conquerors. They viewed reality as a battlefield and used their control of time and space corridors to raid worlds across the cosmos. And at the bottom were the lower echelon reptilians, the ancestors of Earth's reptiles and dinosaurs, genetically engineered by the Draconians in experiments carried out here and in systems like Sirius and Orion. The Draconians were driven to explore space to search for food, as their own planets were barren and lacking in resources. This search would lead them to the rich, lush planets in Lyra. 572 million years ago, Lyran humans had begun developing space travel. They were building their civilization with cooperation and vision. Then, the sky darkened. Massive ships from Alpha Draconis descended. The Draconians came and saw the beautiful Lyran planets with all the abundance and natural resources. They wanted to conquer and control them. At first, the Lyrans and Draconians were cautious, both suspicious. The Draconians, having developed interstellar travel over 4 billion years ago, appeared to offer a deal: resources in exchange for technology. But this was a lie. The Draconians used this as an opportunity to scout out weaknesses. Then they struck, without warning. They annihilated 14 planets. The Lyrans were a peaceful race that never knew war, violence, and deception. They had no weapons to defend themselves. Bila, Tika, Merc, Avion and Avalon, obliterated. Over 50 million Lyrans were slaughtered. The survivors were forced to flee, escaping across the galaxy. This was humanity's first experience of war and deception, and it wouldn't be the last. The Draconians began using human beings as slaves and food. They experimented on Lyran prisoners. They bred with them. This trauma set the tone for millions of years of galactic struggle. The surviving Lyrans scattered to the Pleiades, Andromeda, Sirius, Orion, Cassiopeia, and other star systems. Wherever they went, they adapted and seeded new civilizations. They became survivors, but the Draconians didn't stop. They knew they needed water, so they placed ships near water-rich systems to block access and drive them out. This conflict of light versus dark has shaped our galaxy for millions of years. The reptilians made their stronghold in Orion. Earth became affected 300,000 years ago when the reptilians invaded and won a critical battle here. But not all reptilians served the dark. Some split away and chose the light. Most Draconians operate in fourth density, just beyond human sight. But they can manifest in the third density if they choose. Ultimately, the Lyran-Draconian Wars helped to shape our universe in many ways. From the Draconians came our planet's dinosaurs and reptiles. From the Lyrans came the humanoid races and feline beings whose descendants include lions, tigers, and domestic cats. Our lineage is galactic. Our future is still being written.
Lyra is a force of nature. She's very adventurous.
There is a specific elder race of guardian angelic alien extraterrestrials called the Lyran Syrian Anuhazi, an etheric feline hominid species, which are archangels who originally existed in the 9th dimension of holographic universe 3, Lyra, but later fled to the Sirius star system because their planet was destroyed in war. The Lyran Syrian Anuhazi are also referred to as the Syrian Whites. They are the ones who seeded the Elohim, Leonines, Azarites, Oraphim, and the angelic humans of Tara. They are basically the original race imprint for all the human-type forms in our time matrix. This is our stellar lineage we had to pass through before we get into a human imprint. They're also affiliated with the Great Sphinx, Bastet, Sekhmet, Hathor.
It's called the tachyon cycle. Tachyons are superluminal particles, subparticles. They're very interesting. They're Ki, K-E-Y, yons, Y-O-N-S, the real ones. There's also tachyons that are reversed ones that are made from twisted Metatronic science and its products, black hole technologies, right? We have not been able, the planet has not been able to turn on its tachyon cycle, and nothing that lives in this galaxy, or the solar system, has been able to turn on its tachyon cycle. Because this entire density system, since the fall of Terra and a bit before, to where there's a partial fall of Gaia and a partial fall, which is Polaris, by the way, Gaia is Polaris, and partial fall of something called Sirius C and Procyon. Now, these have something to do with what's called Sagittarius A star at the center of our Milky Way galaxy that scientists have found. That's their names. So it's Sagittarius A star. They call the little thing that they believe is at the center of our galaxy that everything's roaming around. There were events. There were very large intergalactic wars that were taking place. This whole system has been wrapped with wars for the last 250 billion years, actually, which we've talked about in history. But this particular piece of our ancient history is significant today because when the fall of Tara happened, there was already damage to the Gaian grids. And when I talk about grids, I'm talking about the Templar, the Stargate systems. There's already damage to the Gaian grids. There were already damage to the Andromeda grids. There were already damage to the Alcyone grids, which is Terra. When the fall happened, they almost lost Terra completely. It was almost completely shattered. But it was hosted in, parts of it, parts of what was one planetary star body called Tara, were actually stuck back together, not with glue, but with frequency into what is called a host shield. That host shield it was called Salah, and part of it is called Sol, which is our sun. We were hosted from density 2, where the shattering happened, brought down through the lock system and down through into the Milky Way center and down and hosted out into form what is called our solar system right now. This is why the planet appears to have been here much longer than the solar system actually has been, because it was in existence, but it was someplace else. What our scientists here don't realize is there are beings that do move not only planets but solar systems, and they're really big beings. And some of them are nice and some of them aren't. This was a host effort. This was a guardian effort. There is another matrix that we haven't heard much about, and this is where it started and this is where it will end. Here's where we are again in our Akasha back here. There is our parallel Akasha. So here is our parallel Akasha system. Here's our Akasha system. Now the Akashas themselves are not falling. It's only the smaller Eka and Veka systems within them. If they were all light balls within the bigger light ball of the Akasha, it is only the smaller Veka systems that are falling when we talk about the fall. So we have our Akasha, we have our parallel Akasha. Parallel Akasha, a very, very long time ago, went through an experience very similar to what our Veka is going through now, our Eka Veka is going through now. This is where the first mess occurred that culminated in our mess and in their mess. Yeah. Now we're going to understand a little bit of the history so you understand the players in the game now, because this is what we are dealing with now, and these are also going to be names that you will see have to do directly with what we call the victim-victimizer game that is running on this planet and that is being pushed by off-planet forces to try to create what appears to be a holy war between the Christians and the Muslims. And the Christians aren't doing it and the Muslims aren't doing it. It's being moved through them, and they're being manipulated into creating a drama based on defending their gods. And this is why understanding some of this history and some of these names and at least a roundabout understanding of the Eka Veka maps will give you an idea of what this planet is in. We're not just joking when we say it is in a huge, massive drama. It is huge. We're not just talking about one universe. We're talking about what is called a tri-matrix system, where you have 3 matrices involved, 3 Akasha matrices. That's big. This is where the mess started. That's not going to work, is it? Can you just... Yep. Yeah, it's only this one that I need, right? Yeah, that's good. And then if we can bring this one up next to it. Yeah, that's not bad. Yeah, that's pretty good. All right. Now, these are things they're putting back into... pardon the misspellings. They're probably all over the place. Yeah, because they're just like whipping through it, trying to get it at least typeset, because if this was in longhand, those of you who have seen me make Mylars of my longhand stuff, why bother? You know, because you can't read it and I can't either. So they had me typeset this. This is how they gave me the information we needed to talk about today. They have been mentioning since July, little bits about this group called the Borgia, little bits about this, little bits about that. I had no idea where any of this fit in and what the Crystal River was or any of this information. Yeah, we're supposed to teach it, but what are we teaching? I don't understand it either. Right? So they finally put the history in so we would understand the evolution of where this started, because it's where it's ending, and that's where we are now. We are facing the final point that this whole crazy history of building of the beast machine, of the warring between fallen angelic races, it all started with one problem that occurred in one matrix, and that was called originally the Boron-Thesala matrix. And what's interesting, for those of you who might have read Voyagers 1, There's a race called the Barenthesi, I believe they call it. They're connected with the Zetas, and they have hybrid humans running around on planet now too, and they're really cute, actually. There's a couple of them. They're like models and actresses and things. And they have a very particular Borant look to them. These aren't bad guys. These were a bioregenesis race that was taken out of what happened in this matrix. Now this Barenthesi matrix is the echo level of our parallel Akasha. All right, so they were an echo level race, which is a core level race. They're even before in like more, I'm trying to put this in simple terms for newbies. They have more shield coding than just the simple Veka density races. All right, so there was a race called the Barenthesala races of our they're a natural Christic race of our parallel Akasha Eka. Okay. They experienced witnessing a natural fall. Now, I mean natural in that, yes, fall is a consequence of making energy decisions that culminate in your loss of being able to run Christic frequency. And if you just cooperate with what the elders always explain to you in the first place, there are certain ways to behave. It has to do with love and being kind and not hoarding energy and all those things. And there's always little abuses of that as consciousness tests out how far those rules apply. Well, they watched one of those little test out things happen in their own matrix. There was not in their Eka level, but in their, I believe it was, what density said, I'm just learning this stuff too. In their implosion of their density 1 through density 3 system. So they watched one Veka quadrant in their antiparticle system go into space dust return, because something that the consciousness that was the predominant consciousness in that matrix had chose to do with the laws of energy that they were advised not to do, but they did it anyway. Now the way it was described to me, it's written here too, and rather than just read it, I'll try to explain, because I'll get a bit more of the nuance of how they explain it to me. They were this Christic Eka race, the Barenthesala, were so horrified by what they saw, because they loved those people. They were devastated. They knew grief, perhaps for the first time. And it created, because when you're fully online with the Christ, grief isn't even something you experience, because you experience, you know that nothing is ever lost and will always return to source. It just depends on which path they'll return. So they knew all this already, but there was a connection with this particular group of Veka races that did go back through implosion. That the Barenthesalas couldn't let it go because they were just grief-stricken. Grief can be a very blinding thing, and it can really it can give you twisted thinking, and they began to get a bit of that, where they decided what they wanted to do was find the core of that problem is. How could something like that happen? And what is the core problem? They analyzed that down to where they realized it was competition. So then they wanted to find out, well, where does that come from? Extremes in polarity. Okay. They wanted to fix it. They wanted to, first of all, analyze extreme polarity once they had identified competition between polarity extremes as the cause of the twisted thinking that leads to the abuse of the natural laws of physics. Then they wanted to fix the Christ, and this is where they got messed up. They were Christic races. They loved the Christ, but they thought it could be even better if fall potential was eradicated, where nothing could ever fall. There was kind of like a nanny state, where there was always somebody to go and take care of you and make sure you couldn't do that. And they did know better at one point in their own evolution that fall potential occurs when certain laws of natural energy are used and abused to a point where you get consequence directly to action. All right, consequence and action were the only temperance of the gift of free will that was put in this matrix. All right, something could come in and it had free will. Source gave all of us free will. And when we individuated, we had that gift and we could use it any way we wanted to. Even to the extreme of using it in opposite to divine will expression. But in order to temper and to temper the abuses that could be done with free will. Instead of Source or God sitting up there judging, you were bad, going to send you to hell, that kind of stuff. That's just a child's story, all right? What was set in motion with the eternal life Christ code that allows for the natural creation and recreation to continually occur was the action, the part of energy dynamics that has to do with action and consequence, where there are certain consequences to certain actions, consequences in energy and consciousness. And falls result from a buildup of abuses of the natural laws of energy of the Christ that culminate in consequences of energy that create the fall condition. So it isn't something terrible or bad. It is actually what allows eternal life creation to be eternal, because it tempers free will. And free will needs to be tempered, because once you get out in the hologram and you're no longer directly floating around without form in Source as part of Source directly, you're still in the manifest body of Source, and you're still made of the units of consciousness of God. But you can get really lost in holograms out here. Forget who you are, forget what the rules are, and you can make some really bad mistakes. That's how fall races end up fall races. So what the Boran Thesalas tried to do was, because they were so devastated by the loss of those they loved, and they used to understand why fall potential was there and absolutely essential to the functioning of the Christ code itself. So the perpetual motion of the regenerating light body would continually be there, and nothing could abuse it so badly that it wouldn't kick in with its own immune system and create consequences and energy that would stop whatever was trying to eat it alive. Like if a black hole got to a certain level, it will experience consequences, and it will be implosion. And then what was in that black hole will go on back to Source as units of consciousness of Source, as particuli, space dust, on the next natural inhale or adashi cycle. So everything goes home, nothing is ever lost, and Source understands it that way. It is a loving system, and it is something that the Boran Thesalas lost track of understanding through the grief they experienced by watching it in operation in their own Vecca system. And what they tried to do, they decided they were going to do a quarantined experiment in extreme polarities. First of all, they wanted to find out the ins and outs and all the nuances of how this thing called competition for resource, competition for energy, violence, how does this happen? How does something that starts out Christian get so twisted that it can behave that way? So they began what was called the Great 6666 Quarantined Polarity Experiment in their matrix. What they did, let's see, I'll probably read this here. They said, this is how they described it in official, written terms. This was in terms of Earth time translation. It would be 480 billion years ago. All right, the Boran Thesala races of the Eka in our parallel Akasha witnessed the organic fall and implosion of the density 3 through 1, density 1, Particuli Vecca quadrant within their Eka Vecca system. Blinded by grief, the Boran Thesala initiate the Great 6666 Quarantined Polarity Experiment in attempt to discover the root cause of de-evolution and improve upon the eternal life Christ code first creation program in order to eradicate fall potential. Bad idea to start with, but when you're brokenhearted and have a hard time seeing through your tears, I guess you could go there. And I guess there are people here who probably go there, because it's almost like this is a lesson we need to learn, because we're watching one. And when we get out, if we get out, we'll be watching it from that kind of perspective. It would be a good idea to realize it's not as merciless as it appears to be, no matter how much grief you're blinded by. Because if you get blinded by grief, you can do things that you really meant well in doing, but they can go really, really bad in ways you never expected. And that's what happened here. They created this polarity experiment. The Eka Boran Thesala races first devised the victim-victimizer game program. Kind of like cops and robbers, cowboys and Indians, that kind of stuff. You play the bad guy, I play the good guy, right? They were going to do it in a quarantine system. I believe they went into their density 4. They went from the Eka into density 4 and 3 to do this experiment. It was supposed to be quarantined within Yeah, and this is in the parallel akasha again. It was supposed to be quarantined only in the upper densities, a small area of the upper densities of their Vecca system, in one Vecca quadrant. So they created the game program, the VV game program. You play the victim, I play the victimizer. Let's see where that goes. But it was meant to be fair, where it would flip. You'd have 6 cycles of victim, victimizer. The next 6 cycle would be victimizer, victim, which means they'd switch places. Whatever group was the victim in the first cycle would be the victimizer in the next. And then it was supposed to flip back again twice, where you'd have, say, group A is the victim and B the victimizer. Then you have group B is the victim, then group A is the victim, then group B is the victim, where they each get 2 cycles, 2 6 cycles of experiencing what it meant, what it felt like to be on that side of a polarity. They didn't take somebody from someplace else to do this with. They took their own Eka group that wanted to do this experiment and divided them up into 3 camps. One would be the control camp that would retain sanity and retain a natural, what's called tri-Vecca code. All right, their natural genetic matrix would be built on a tri-Vecca. Now, for new people, that means just imagine instead of 2 circles together, you have 2 circles together plus a third. It's the natural configuration, the natural trinity configuration of Partakai units. It is the natural Christic creation code program, or core program, is built on tri-Vecca light units. And all gene codes that are Christic are built on tri-Vecca light units. What they did, and here's where this part of what later became the beast machine evolved from, was they kept their normal control group with its natural tri-Vecca coding. And then the other 2 groups of themselves, one did, and I don't know how they did here, you raise hands, you want to play victim or victimizer first, you know, that kind of thing, but they agreed. They were doing this with themselves. You know, we'll put ourselves right in the line of fire and experience this, and then come back out and we'll know the solution, we'll know how to fix the crust. Yeah, well, they built, now these decisions are being made in the Eka level, right? They're agreeing to incarnate in a controlled situation out of the Eka into the density levels of density 4 and density 3. And they're going to put that little experiment there, and theoretically they've heard that you could lose track of yourself once you got into density forms. But it was a theory, you know, kind of like read it in a book somewhere, but yeah, maybe, maybe not, we'll find out. That's why the control group was there, all right? The control group was meant to make sure if the polarity extremes, you know, went nuts or something, and they were losing their own, that the one with the tri-Vecca coding was meant to pull them both back out. And, you know, it had the code that they could hybridize with them, and in one generation, bring them right back around, where they wouldn't have the mutation anymore. Because how they studied polarity was creating 2 race lines of their own, modifying them genetically to a bi-Vecca code, which means they took the 3rd element of the trinity out. And they gave one a dominant charge and one a passive charge. So they had extremes in gender polarity. They had extremes in energy running capacity. And they didn't foresee how bad it was going to get. It wasn't all put here, but earlier they'd given me several pages of scribbled stuff about a month ago on explaining this much about what became the Borgia races. In this polarity experiment, the Boranthesalas broke themselves into 2 groups. The name of the other polarity group doesn't matter, the one that took the victim stance, but the one that took the aggressor stance were called the Borgia Musala. All right, the Borgia Musala were the ones who started with, they'd be the victimizers here, not here, here, not here. Well, they got to here. And the Borgia Musala strain of the Boranthesalas got so lost so fast, these guys didn't know what to do with it, because they couldn't even hear them anymore. They couldn't, you know, when they were trying to like telepath to them, like to guide them, they completely shut off. But what they did have was the density 3 and 4 level of awareness, and they created a time rip technology. Now this is before wormholes. Wormholes are much more stable. They're much more constructed. But there are ways to blast holes with frequency through the light body structure of matrices or through a quarantine fence. And they developed on their own, with the intelligence that they did have, a crude but very effective time rip technology. The Borgia group destroyed the other group, the victim group. There was no time for a flip to occur, almost like a, you blow a whistle, everybody sit in your chairs, okay, now you change roles. There was no time. They hit 3 6s. They did 1 6 cycle with the Borgia dominant, another where the Borgia went passive, and they dealt so poorly with being on the victim side of it that by the time they got back to being the victimizers again, that was it. They weren't going to see the next victim cycle. So here in the 6th of there should have been 4 6 cycles. They ended up with 3 6 cycles, and right there in the end of the 6th cycle, they broke out of the quarantine. They destroyed the other race completely. They broke out of the quarantine force field of the density 4 and density 3 system and spread like a wildfire virus. They took out the control group. They very rapidly caused the fall of the entire Ekaveka. Not the Akasha, but the Ekaveka. And while this was occurring, because it's our parallel Akasha, we're neighbors, right? Our system in our Akasha with our Ekaveka systems are neighbors. The time rip that they use to rip all the way through their Ekaveka system to literally take the whole thing into black hole fall created an unnatural rip. It was almost like an accident, but it ripped into our Eka just a little bit, just enough. Because if you were watching from another Veka, like the Aquari were, right? The Aquari actually were watching from their Akasha. Now, this was happening over here. Our living system was here, and it had already been seeded 950 billion years ago. The last life wave of our founders' races came out from our Eka and were put into our Veka systems. So this was going along naturally here. These guys had a total blowout of the Eka-Veka system, and that blowout created a very unstable rip between our Eka core and what became the Borgia black hole. All right, that created a condition for everybody else who's watching, going, uh-oh. They saw how fast the time rip technology had taken out their Eka-Veka system, and fast in terms of cosmic years. All right, I mean, it's a blink of an eye as far as what some eternal races experience as time passage. All right, the quarantine broke 480 billion years ago, right? By 450 billion years ago, the whole matrix had fallen, and and the time rip had come in to our Eka system. So that's quite a lot of billions of years, but it's short for something like this to occur. I mean, if something for say a raider race to take a time rip technology and develop it enough where you could take out this much of the natural light body structure, it usually doesn't happen. It was a learning experience for everyone involved. What was done when it started, because the Aquari groups saw what was happening during this period. They knew it was going so fast they weren't going to be able to stop it. But what they were hoping to be able to do is quarantine it in that system until the next starfire cycle on the Akasha level, where it would be cut loose, be its own system, and it couldn't hurt anything. But because of the rip into our system, if they had tried to quarantine it. Now the Aquari, again, here's the adjacent Akasha, and here's the parallel adjacent Akasha. All right, the parallel adjacent Akasha are where it's the Aquarion matrix. These guys were close enough to do something about it, but far enough to not get sucked into it, basically. And the Wisala, or Wisale matrix, was here, and that didn't have a black hole in it yet. So these guys got together with the founders races and the Eka level races, with our Iani and our Deane races and the Akasha levels, to form what was called a tri-matrix, 1 matrix, 2 matrix, 3 matrix coalition. It was called the Crystal River Cooperative. And what they were going to do was, what they wanted to do then, but they couldn't because of the rip into our Eka, was they wanted to use the combined frequencies of their 3 crystal spirals to create enough frequency to create a seal on the Borgia black hole system. It would be stronger than what they had learned how to amplify and bend with their time rip technology. It would have been fine, and they would have got this all over with then, if it hadn't been for the accidental rip and link that occurred into our Eka. Because if they had quarantined the Borgia black hole then, it would have sent us back to immediate space dust. I say us, but most of us weren't even part of this drama at this point. You know, we angelic humans did not exist at this point. This was way before. We're talking, you know, like 480 billion years ago through 450 billion years ago. So instead, they took the long way round. In order to let the life field that had been set into our Akasha and Ekaveka system 950 billion years ago, there's lots of life field here. There was a lot of consciousness here and doing well and that kind of thing. Instead of having them all end up going back as space dust just to seal that rip, what they decided to do was several things, but they formed the Crystal River Coalition. There would be a time, there would come a time when it could be done. Now, they did a whole bunch of interesting things, like doing hybridization experiments. Not experiments even, they were hybridization plans in order to, first they had to get, the Aquarii were the leaders of this. The Aquarii level of the hub level of the Aquarii matrix, right? That's the inner, you have the core, the inner, the middle, and the outer domains. The Aquarii word goes with the outer domain races that were seeded into the outer domains from two races of the Aquarian matrix. Their hub races, which are the aqueous races, and their edonic middle domain races, which are called the aquafarii. The aquafarii and the aqueous got together and created a race line of their kind for the outer domains first there, and they did this in cooperative with that trimatrix Crystal River cooperative. All right, they seeded first their own outer domains into the outer domains of the Aquarii matrix, and it became, like in shorthand, the Aquarii matrix. It's actually the Aquarion matrix, which would be the parallel adjacent Akasha. The Weaselae then hybridized with some of them and brought them in to the outer domains of the Weaselae matrix. And then they were also brought in through some branches of our founders' races into our Ettore and Adore matrix. When I refer to Ettore and Adore, I'm referring to, again, there is what is called in a Veka system, you know, it's not even here, in the 4 quadrants of a Veka. You have the Eka core. There's also, you could call the flip side of the same creation. It has to do with different angular rotational particle spin, etc. But there are 2 twin flames that form the cores of Ekas. So you end up with 2 Ekas born out of the same seed. One has certain characteristics of polarity and frequency, one has the other. So when I talk about Ettore, I'm talking about the side that our universal 15-dimensional time matrix is in, and the Adore side, which is in the same place as we are, but a different angular rotation of particle spin. The Ettore-Adore system is our twin flame system in our Akasha's Ekaveka system. So anyway, what I'm trying to fill in here, because I don't want to lose forever and ever the understanding of the people who cared enough to come that might be new to this work. All right, I'm also going to, here we go, heat flashes. All right, excuse me. Can you take this for 2 seconds? Yeah, time for the striptease again. It gets unbearable when the frequencies start coming in and the wave, my back goes stiff, and the heat goes up. Not yet. No, thank you. Now, all of this history, and just at least beginning to understand where these names fit, is important to what we're dealing with right here and right now. Right? We have the Aquarii line people coming from the parallel adjacent Akasha. We have us over here in our Akasha and our now falling Ekaveka system. And we have still the viable portions of the Weaselae matrix that didn't fall black hole. Now there's a whole history here that I may touch on a little bit later. There's an, all right, yeah. There's an activation coming through. Something's going on. Yeah, they're going to let me know in a minute. Oh, and by the way, if you're new here, we get this on occasion. It's like, oh, hold on a second, what? Right? Because live things will come through, and they kind of keep us updated that way. But for now, I will go on with what I was trying to talk about. We've got our Aquarii brothers here. There's a whole lineage that evolved. I will probably just try to read it, and if I'm going to do that, I should probably read it off the paper copy. Do we have a paper copy? Yes. Okay. I will do that because it will be easier than me trying to bend myself in half, reading here and then flipping another Mylar. I will read you what they gave me today as far as where these race lines fit. We got to where the first mess happened, and it had to do with the great experiment, the great polarity experiment. This is where we ended up with the 666 part of the Metatronic beast machine, which came later. These events are what caused later the fall of Metatron, the fall of the Wiesedek and Wiesedrack matrices, and the fall of a part of the outer domain Aquarii races from the Wiesela matrix, which became the Equarii races. And the Equarii races then broke through into our Atori Vecca and hybridized with one of our fallen Seraphi groups called the Omicron Draconians and created what are called the Dragon Line races that exist here and that are very, very intertwined with the angelic human and, well, now they're entwined with the angelic human gene code.
Your DNA is not what you think. It is actually a holographic computer which projects your physical reality based on the interplay between your personal experiences and the collective consciousness. Every thought, past, present, and future, exists as scalar wave imprints within the unified field. Your DNA pulls frequencies from this field based on the beliefs and experiences stored in your cellular memory, and your neurological structure translates these frequencies into your own unique holographic reality. However, your personal morphogenetic field is intertwined with Earth's collective morphogenetic field, meaning your thoughts and actions are not isolated. They ripple outward, influencing the collective consciousness and shaping our shaped consensus reality.
It requires 8% of the population on the planet to assemble the fifth DNA strand and be able to hold fifth dimensional frequencies in their body in order for Earth to be able to merge properly with Terra during this time cycle. We're not quite up to that yet, but we're close. So one of the things they're asking us to do is learn about our DNA, learn how to use the higher chakras to bring high frequency energy into the DNA, which helps it assemble. Because the higher you can get your DNA and your body and your consciousness vibrating, you're plugged right into the Earth grid. It will make the Earth grid vibrate faster. There's strength in numbers. The more of us that can do this, the faster the Earth grid will vibrate. So it's one of the things they're asking us to do. If the majority of humans totally ignore this grand opportunity we're being presented with, there are two worst case scenarios. One is we do start to enter the morphogenetic wave period, and the grids are so far out of balance that it starts to make seals on the Earth's vortexes loosen, which will cause volcanic activity and it will cause plate shifting. And it could be on a massive level. If it's really out of balance, it could create up to a 45-degree shift of the angle of the Earth spinning on its axis, which we're history if that happens. It doesn't look like that's going to happen. It's not that bad yet. But they want us to be aware of how bad it could be. They want us to be aware that they're not joking. They're not saying, oh gee, come be spiritual because it's fun. They're saying, hello, you're in trouble if you don't pay attention. And how many of us is it going to take to get you to pay attention? You know, so one of the neat things that happens if things go right is that during the 5-year period when the wave is cresting, the fifth strand of DNA will manifest spontaneously within the bioenergetic field of every person on the planet. Now right now, we have people with all sorts of different gene codes on the planet. Some have fourth DNA strand assembled, but some only have 2. Now, when you look and you say, hey, I have 2 DNA strands, you know, we see that under a microscope. The other 2 are in your double. Most of us have 4 strands here. And the strands are not that easily divided up. We're okay, once I have my 12-strand package, I'm going to see 12 little strands or 6 double helixes. They're all encoded through each other. But basically, the human being was designed to have 12 strands of DNA. And when we do have that fully activated, we are immortal. And we live in harmonic universe too. And we're composed of less dense particles. So when down here, what we are really trying to do, and unknowingly, for millions of years down here, we've been evolving, not knowing what that meant. What does it mean to evolve? We're here. We're here, we try to survive. That's about it. That's all, as far as we've got in understanding what evolution is about. What evolution is really about is, just like with a planet evolves by pulling frequency into its morphogenetic field from the unified field of the dimensions that it's in. That's exactly how we evolve too. That's how DNA strands evolve. We can use the higher chakras to repair damage that was done to our genetic code. in order to get it functioning properly again. Because at several times within the last 1 million years, our species has been altered several times. It's been had certain codes, base tones or overtones, unplugged within certain DNA strands, which literally stopped the evolutionary process, so we could not ascend. We have to fix that. And the Guardians are giving us enough information where we can start to understand how to do that. They're planning to give us exercises on how to use the higher chakras, Keylontic exercises, to start repairing the DNA strands so we can take control of our own ascension process. Because even if 20 people, only 20, were able to make it through the portals whole, where they didn't have to die to do it, they could walk through, that is such a victory for this race. Because this race forgot eons ago that this was even possible. So we're hoping that a lot more people get to go through the portals. Alright, if they don't, there's going to be one thing you probably will see if the plan is going the way it's supposed to. If the natural morphogenetic wave is happening as it's supposed to, you will see certain areas having certain earth changes and large groups of people being killed. It will appear to be tragic from out here. These are arranged. The souls involved knew they couldn't assemble their DNA fast enough. They wanted to get out of here and catch that morphogenetic wave before the portals closed, because they can ascend from D4 while the portals are open. And you go to D4 after you leave the physical body in D3. So if in the next 20 years we start to see more and more groups of people dying, don't let it scare you. Don't let it frighten you. Know there's a higher purpose to it. And know those people want to get free. And this was the chance. So there are things that you may see out here that will make no sense unless you understand some of the things that are happening behind the scenes.